Hello and welcome back to the Heart and Soul Conversations. Today again with one of my favorite guests, Esther Tankhilevich, who is a coach who has been working a lot around assertiveness, or is working a lot around assertiveness, and at the same time has been in very senior roles in leadership in business, both here in Australia and overseas, which makes her a really interesting conversation partner when it comes not only to assertiveness, but also to career and career progression and what it takes, who you need to be, how to show up to find success in the field of your choice. And this is the conversation we want to have today, where we want to basically see what it takes if you're starting out in a career to stand out of the crowd, to be the best you can be, to then move ahead, gain the trust, I guess, to have more responsibility, and then grow your own leadership capabilities and your own assertiveness in that context, I trust, to fulfill your own true potential. So let's look into this, Esther. Let's imagine we are having someone here who is just starting out, or the mom of someone who is just starting out. We never know. So imagine we are entering a business, we are in a fairly junior role, and we are learning, and at the same time we are ambitious. What are the things that we can do? What are the things that you would have done in your career? I'm happy to throw in my experience as well, that have allowed you to learn the ropes and then advance from there.
Great. And I'm so happy to be here. Thank you so much for having me again. I would say the things that held me in good stead in the early stages when I was, I started off as an account manager in London, and I sort of fell into digital marketing before digital marketing really existed. We were a custom news agency. And I just started as an account manager, and, basically sort of quickly got promoted to being head of a department. And I think the reasons why that happened quickly, one of them was that I really over-prepared for all my little hurdles and mountains. So every client meeting, I was just over-prepared. I really took my time to passionately understand the client, to really understand what they wanted from the partnership. And I just really put in the hard yards, probably a lot more than most. I took the meetings much more seriously, so that when I got to the meeting, I could just flow and I could sort of relax because I'd done my homework and I really took their time seriously. So I think just, being really invested, taking what you're doing seriously, being really curious about who you're working with, like genuine curiosity and interest, because people really pick up on that. They pick up on that authentic, I really want to get to know you and your business and your unique pain points and unique pain points, unique selling points and pain points and aspirations, and really not just broad brushing everything. So I think that's the first thing. The other interesting thing that happened was that I started taking on clients that nobody wanted.
So interesting.
I basically took on accounts that were on fire, people used to say. So
as in on fire, as in something already clearly going wrong, where it's like you're basically sticking your neck out if you are working with them.
Yeah, they were on the ropes. These clients were on the ropes.
Okay.
And in our business and in account management, everything was based on client retention or client churn. That was your performance. It was retaining an annual client base revenue number. So everything was about retention. And what happened was there was a whole lot of clients that were basically going to cancel. And I just kept putting my hand up to bring them back from the dead, to fix the problems. And I don't really know why. I think actually there was a level of gamesmanship in me that was like, you know what, I'm just going to give it a crack because no one else wants to touch it. People just avoided them. It was like, oh, no one wanted to pick up the phone. And obviously, if you leave that problem and you avoid it,
festering.
Yeah, it's just gonna. And I was like, I just want to see what I can do here. And it was probably, you know, an element of gamesmanship, of curiosity, and I knew what my strength was in business was relationships. That was where I would flow, and particularly gaining rapport and trust. So I knew that was my flow zone, and it was sort of a bit of a challenge to myself of like, I'm just going to go in there and I'm just going to give it my best, and I'm going to see what happens. And I started bringing these clients back, and then I got given more of those and more of those, and then people started wanting training around that. And it was like you sort of built up something that you were good at, and you sort of establish a bit of a, you know, a bit of a strength, and then people start wanting to tap into that. And with the right support, I think the other key thing that's not necessarily replicable, but I had great support from my CEO, who really believed in young talent. He was an amazing advocate, and he was really good for sort of seeing raw potential and would promote quickly. So it was sort of this perfect storm of these sort of variants happening, the business being in really high growth, me starting to really kind of earn my stripes and stand out from maybe people taking an easier path. I was like willing to like get up the mountain
and take the risks. I hear you, absolutely. And what I'm hearing as well, and what I sometimes recommend to people, is be willing and able to take calculated risks. What I'm hearing with you, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that if you are taking on, especially early days, you're taking on clients that basically are on the out anyway, and that are lost and clearly lost before you set foot into this, you can also potentially make higher risk suggestions, be bold and try stuff out, because if you fail, well, what's the worst that can happen? They're gone and it's not your fault. So you can potentially really be out there and make bold moves and see what happens. I often kind of tell people to do that when they are in a work environment that they are basically set to leave because it's too toxic or it's not serving them anymore. I'm going like, well, utilize the challenge while you are starting to look elsewhere, while you are prepping, while you are having conversations elsewhere and building your network and applying. Let's see if we can utilize the environment that you're in right now to strengthen your muscle and flex it against whatever whatever pushback you are meeting. Like if there's a toxic boss, see how we can build up your resistance while you still have a sparrings partner like that. So that if you ever come across something similar, you already have built up more strengths. Why not utilize the lemons that life hands you sometimes
I love that.
to practice with? Because like always taking the easy route, I agree with you, isn't necessarily the best. What I found and would like to throw into the mix in this conversation is I agree fully with you on curiosity. Like being actually curious, wanting to learn, being that sponge that is soaking up. That's not just kind of waiting until somebody says something and then goes like, oh, okay, right, I'll do it, but actually proactively goes out. I think being proactive is so important. Go out, ask your questions, be really willing, and be bold enough to have conversations, even if people who are a little bit higher up, if you have access to them, and have conversations and share observations that you are making, share experiences that are a bit left of field, maybe that you've had in different jobs as well, and what you see potentially could be improved. I mean, obviously that depends on the environment that you are in, but really bring all of who you are and all of what you have gathered elsewhere in a spirit. We've talked about the spirit we are in before, in the spirit of really wanting to serve with all of your capacity and really wanting to be one of the people who link shoulders or link arms, I think you say, and are moving the whole thing ahead, rather than just being someone who's doing the minimum necessary it's kind of like, are you aiming for an A or are you aiming to pass? Right? This whole good enough thing. I always tell people, like, why on earth would you aim for good enough? That's just past fail. Aim for awesome. And then if you're reaching somewhere like a level of a B or C, that's good. And then you can improve from there. But why would you ever aim for good enough in the first place?
100%. I totally agree. And the more pride you take in what you do, because, you know, our work is our craft. It's what we choose to do with our strengths. So if you take pride in that and real accountability and drive to really stretch yourself and to grow and to push yourself, it's so much more satisfying than your bare minimums sort of existence.
Yeah, absolutely. And even what you're just saying, the satisfaction we gain from our work, also by giving it our everything and by bringing all of who we are to the table, rather than just biding our time until we can get home and watch our favorite next Netflix series. Like, if that's what you're aiming for, that's going to be the kind of results that you are getting. And it's another thing, by the way, at that stage and through all the different stages of career, is to really take the results that we are getting as feedback regarding the way that we are showing up. Obviously, if you are especially in corporate, in a toxic environment, I keep bringing this back because I'm working with a few clients that have had that experience. Obviously, that doesn't necessarily reflect on you and who you are. It might be reflecting on a lack of assertiveness and you putting boundaries and standing up for yourself. Maybe there are environments, however, even if you do that, that will not work for you, which then shows you it's time to move out. But in general, really kind of showing up as all of who you are. Now let's assume we've done this for a while and we are being handed opportunities, like you were, like I have been, because somebody in a leadership position sees that there is a person who is willing to go the extra mile, to bring energy, to be on fire. For me, I remember it wasn't so much in doing extra hours because I had a baby before I took my first job. So I was kind of like 26 with a 1-year-old. And I was always the one who had to go home. Like all my tech startup folks, they would party through the night and then be in the office still when I got back. And I was the boring one who had to go home and feed a kid. It was like not great. But at the same time, I was the one who had slept better. And so it wasn't even about the amount of hours I was able to put in, but about the amount of value I was able to add, which is a really important distinction sometimes, I think. So if we are being handed more responsibility, then what's next? How do we deal with this and make sure that not only we can handle the responsibility, but we are really becoming the leader that we need to be?
So I think in that sort of next growth phase, there are a few things that I think a good practice to sort of do at that time and or to keep in mind. One thing at that stage when you're still forming in terms of a leader, and I come back to this a lot, is strength and vulnerability. So I really am passionate about creating, cultures and atmospheres where you put your hand up when you don't know the answers. It's not, assertiveness isn't about knowing all the answers and having all the information and being good at everything, because of course that's impossible. I think when you sort of shift your perspective to be sort of saying, being comfortable to put your hand up when you don't know the answers, to defer to people in other teams who are excellent at what they do and have those specialties, to be able to draw on expertise from a place of confidence, and to surround yourself with people smarter than you in different ways, to have
brilliant.
Yes.
I so agree. Sorry if I'm interrupting on this.
No.
So valuable. That's exactly what I've found has worked for me. And it's what I've seen over and over and over.
Yeah.
One of my first bosses, who funnily enough was younger than I was, so the guy who started the tech startup that I kind of was on the rising tide with. He said to me one thing that I think he learned when he did an internship at Facebook, funnily enough. I think he learned it there. He said, A players recruit A players, B players recruit C players. Meaning, if you are willing to give it your everything and you really trust yourself and you have that confidence, you will surround yourself with people as good as you or better. In service of the project, in service of the shared goal that you have. If you lack that and you are a B player, meaning you're kind of not really as good as, probably even measured against your own potential, and you kind of know where the pitfalls are and you don't have that self-confidence, you will recruit down. You will surround yourself with people less than you because you feel threatened by equals or by people who are better than you. And that's a mindset setting. It's not about how much you know and how good you are. It's a mindset about whether you make it all about you or all about the project, and whether you are acting from ego or from service. And I'm hearing that very strongly. I used to be the same person. I'd go like, I had lunch the other day with someone from the other team and they actually have an answer. And I know you don't like that team, guys, but they actually are working on something that would work with us. Would it be okay if I bring them in and they can brief you and we can see if we can work something out together? Where you are being a leader, not because you have the answers, but because you are willing to move the project forward.
100%. Yeah, 100%.
Keep going on this one. That's interesting.
Yeah, it's that whole premise of you don't want to be in the smartest person in the room, because that's the most boring room to be in. You know, the room that you're intimidated by everybody is like, let me go into that room. Like that's but the wow room. So, and it's sort of, I think that brings me to the next point of another sort of underestimated part of moving up the ranks, I think, is allegiances. So allegiances with different teams. And when I actually started working in London, we talked about this briefly, when there was sort of a time of really high pressure, when, you know, the wheels were falling off the cart and there was just like too many clients coming on board and there wasn't enough consolidation, and it was a high stress time. And what happened, this is before I moved to Boston, what I saw happening was all of the teams were starting to say no to each other. Everybody was just like, leave me alone. I'm too busy. I can't help you. I'm just doing what I did yesterday, and we can't iterate and we don't have time to get creative. And it sort of became quite a siloed environment, because it was like a self-preservation
fight or flight mode, basically.
Yeah, right. Everyone was just like, go away. And interestingly, when I moved to Boston and we started the sister company in Boston, we had the benefit of seeing what had happened there. And I was, you know, still in sort of middle management at that time. I was determined for that not to happen again, where the culture was really sort of, everybody was saying no to each other.
Elbowy.
So, yeah, just animosity between teams, and sort of, you know, maybe some resentment and stereotypes, and people just not understanding what each other did. And so I was really strong on not just unity within the team, which was everything to me, which we can talk about maybe next, but cross-departmental allegiances. So, you know, taking out a writer for coffee and just having a chat to them, and, you know, getting to know them, and, you know, speaking to the tech team, not just like for 2 minutes, but just like having a chat to them about the weekend and, you know, how's it been going, and actually just getting to know the rest of the teams, and building up allies, so that when you need to call a favor, you can, because you've invested your time and energy into building up those relationships. And a lot of people just don't take the time to do that.
I did exactly the same thing. Mine was because we were such a small company, like 10, 12 people by the time I started, which grew into a 270, I think, by the time I left. It was just a very successful tech startup. It wasn't my doing that it was that successful, but I was a part of it and early on. And in the beginning, I was having lunches with lots of different people because I was just curious who was coming on board. And I wanted to make sure that they feel really welcome and included. And over time, and I didn't distinguish between, are they higher up in the ranks when they have been recruited in, or are they lower down? And over time, that became a bit more strategic, not so much in terms of what can I get out of you, but also I'm just curious and want to make sure that our department at the time is linked into all the other departments. That paid off millionfold over the years, because sometimes there would be something in my team. I'd have, like back then I was smoking, I'd have a cigarette break with the accounting boss, like the CFO, earlier, and had a chat with him about the kids. And then someone from my team, the leader in my team, was saying, he's such a jerk. He's not willing to pay for, like, we have to go by train to Cologne because he's not willing to pay for the flights. And I said, hang on, that really doesn't sound like him. Are you sure? Yeah. And I just went back to the guy and said, look, this is what it has come across. There must be I trust that's not what you mean. There must have been some sort of miscommunication. Am I right about that? Or are you actually meaning to say that? And he's like, no, that is a misunderstanding. Well, it was so straightforward. So it was just often like knowing the goodwill between people, like knowing the person versus that being a very far removed person that I have never spoken to, and just like making sure that they can just have a chat to each other.
Yeah, it's
often really simple like this, and like being that spider in the web person who just has connections everywhere, in the spirit of serving and supporting others, while also being able to call a favor every now and then. Super invaluable. I agree. What else? What are other factors that allowed you to rise further then?
Yeah, so in a similar vein, it was getting to know my team really well.
Nice.
So not just, just being given a team of people and just being like, okay, here's what we're all doing, and getting on with it. I would really make a point to just get out of the building. That was important. Get out of the building, go for sushi, go for a coffee, and just get to know them and really understand, who is this person outside work? What really lights them up? Because then when it's coming to, the point that you're starting to, you're motivating your team and you're starting to get your kind of management chops, you can be so much more authentic and speak to people so much more authentically, because you're actually talking to people about what's important for them versus like, here's just my like PowerPoint about random stuff. So
right.
I think really both sides really get across all the departments and really invest in with your team and get to know them on a human level outside what you share in work.
Absolutely. And I agree with that, and would say also to be able to facilitate their development, because as you're getting to know your team members, especially if they are still fairly junior, just to know that somebody, we were talking about DISC before, is more introvert versus more extrovert, someone who will very assertively stand up for themselves, or someone who is more the quiet, kind supporter in the background, someone who's detail oriented versus someone who is very big picture, allows you to then distribute the work within the team in a way that everybody can play to their strengths, right? And that's on you as the manager to be able to facilitate that.
100%. I really got so much out of those behavioral profiling tools back then and now, in helping everybody understand, this is my flow zone. This is this is where you can tap me on the shoulder and ask me to do this, because this is my jam. This is what I'm good at. And everybody getting a real kind of good vibe about, this is what I'm great at. But also everybody being really clear about, this is my stretch area. This is what's hard for me. And this is what I'm working on. And not being something to be ashamed of or embarrassed about, or, it's like, just, this is your stretch area, and this is what you can do to develop that. So I think that's huge.
Fantastic. So now let's go one rank further up. So now you are in a leadership position, and you are really the one calling the shots, making the decisions, hiring, firing if necessary, and having to sometimes make the tough calls. My curiosity here is, because I trust that most people watching this will be more in a employee and or kind of middle management stepping up. This obviously it's more like a pyramid and there's not that many people on the top. The curious thing is, what are you looking for from that perspective? When you are looking from the top down to decide who are you bringing up versus who are you probably leaving where they are to make sure that they learn what they need to learn before you see that they have what it takes to lead, versus, and who are the people where you are going, that's a question mark, I'm not sure if I can keep you here because you're not showing up. What are the criteria that you have when you are in that position to build a strong team that works well together and that has punch?
Yeah, so it's a great question. And I think what I used to do, and I actually did find that it was a combination of things that were very role dependent. So for specific roles, there were specific things that were super important. And then there were qualities that I just wanted in my management team, in my VPs and heads of department.
Okay. Aim for the qualities, because the specifications of a specific role, that is just like either you are qualified or not when you apply. But let's look at those qualities. That's interesting. So what are the key elements you were looking for? And because I would have been someone who would have liked to work for you, I think. I like you.
Vice versa.
But what would you have been looking for?
Yeah, so I used to, talk about this and hiring quite openly. I ended up sort of developing non-negotiables, which separated, the nice to haves in terms of what we hired, and then the things that were absolutely crucial. So my few key non-negotiables were, one was initiative. So you had to be the type of person that would take the initiative to go and try and find, and it was really initiative and resourcefulness together. I'd say a combination of initiative and resourcefulness. So not being needed to be asked to do everything, to just have, independent thought, to see a problem and think, okay, let's think about how that can be done better, or to, have fresh thinking. And just that initiative and resourcefulness was a really important quality that we sort of found would breed the right kind of culture of people looking for ways to solve problems independently, with support from management, but sort of independent thinkers versus people being, that were waiting to be told, what to do and how to do it constantly.
Frustrating as a boss, I know.
Yeah.
And you're constantly having to put your thought into someone else's job. It's frustrating.
Yeah. And again, like there were some roles where that wasn't that much of an issue, but I'm sort of speaking to like VPs and heads of departments. So that was really big. Also, importantly, people that shared my view of really unity, collaboration, and the team spirit being really strong. Because, a business is only as good as the people within its walls. It will live and die on the quality of the people. And without a strong, supportive culture, that just, it can disintegrate really fast. So it was important for me to keep bringing up people in the business that embodied that. And it didn't mean that it was just a positive only workplace. It didn't mean that negative performance couldn't be called out and recognized. It was just about making sure that there was a good spirit, again, through how you manage people, how you deliver feedback, and sort of how you manage your teams. So yeah, that was, and it sort of brings me on to Yeah, well, it's probably fits more into the last question of another important thing about when you're coming up in the ranks of management, how it's related, and it's important, I guess, from the VPs also. I think what I did when I was coming through the ranks, and I was, perhaps struggling with how to confidently and assertively deliver feedback on performance, good and bad, in good spirit. Sometimes it was like, if you're a new manager, or you're sort of partway through your career, it can be a bit nerve-wracking to have to sit down with somebody and call out,
especially if they're older than you, or they've been on board for longer than you.
And what I did to help me kind of get through that, it was I've always kept it, I actually imagined myself as like a sports coach. And I was like,
nice.
In a sports, on the field, whether it's rugby or whatever, netball, hockey, the coach is there to really not just tell the players they're doing awesome and everything's perfect. It's to really give them the criticism where they need it, so they can stretch and grow, but to also really applaud awesome performance when it happens. And I think when you can be empowered to deliver those messages assertively, to do those things, to really celebrate and recognize awesome performance, but to be able to really call it on the chin when it's not there, and to outline what the delta is, it can really sort of free you up to feel more assertive in how you kind of play that out. So that was important from my managers as well.
What I think comes there, and this is just from my memory and being in similar situations, and I know sometimes that would have given me like big headaches, and sometimes it was really easy, is to remember, again, being in service to your team as well. And I was coming back to that. That's like the yogic way of thinking, and basically holding in your mind the full expression of that person as you can see it. Remembering the potential that person has, and then hold them accountable to that standard by you being able to point that out, because you've done your homework, you have sat down with them for coffees, you have spent time, you get to know them as a person, to be able to remind them of what you think they are capable of and what you trust they have in them, versus what you see is going on at the moment. And then basically just asking, how can I support you? What is it that you need? Am I accurate in what I see in you? What is it that you need in order to perform to your best? Or am I maybe wrong? And is there something that I don't see that we need to add to the picture? But basically, how can I serve you to play at your best? And then obviously, if somebody isn't willing and isn't showing up and has their own stuff going on and isn't happy anymore,
of course,
then okay, so how can I support you to move along? And ideally make you happy enough that you're willing to give the person who is at the door coming in a proper handover.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. It's, it's definitely about sort of and obviously, as you say, it can be both. It can be somebody that's checked out and, could be actually adding to the toxic culture, and could be like a well poisoner that's doesn't want to be in the role anymore, is starting to, grumble and complain to everybody else. And it's time to have that conversation and, let them go and be amazing in another company, in another role where they, possibly could be. It doesn't always have to be, even, letting people go can be a conversation that's done in good spirit, and wishing them well and recognizing that it's not a fit. Absolutely. Well, very interesting. This was great food for thought, and I trust that someone who has been watching this, who is kind of wanting, like, has ambition in them but is young and isn't yet really clear on what can I do in order to be seen, in order for someone to recognize my potential and all, that there have been a lot of gems in this conversation. Is truly like, what can you do and how can you step up? And basically, I think it always comes back to, how can you show up as a leader before you are handed the position? Because usually we're not handed the position and then become worthy of it. We're first showing up and then
the position is following. There's this model in coaching, if you guys haven't heard me talk about this, it's called be, do, have, right? And the sentence is, who do you need to be in order to do what you need to do so you can have what you want to have? In order to answer this truly, you need to first answer the have question. What is it that you want to have? What's the result that you are aiming for? And this is if you are running a business, or if you are in a management position, or if you are just starting out. What is it where you want to be in a year, in 3 years, in 5 years? What's the result that you are going for? And then to start to line up who you are and how you are showing up with that, and hold yourself to the standard of being the manager, showing up as you would. Doesn't mean like bossing everyone around, but it means, for example, to be proactive about stuff and take responsibility and do more than is being expected and then you're asked to do. And in showing up as that person, then often life will hand you the opportunities to match that. The doing flows downward from the being. How you are showing up and who you consider yourself to be as a leader will inform your choices in the actions that you take. And so that model always has served me really well. We basically were announcing ourselves as a retreat center before we ever had a paying guest. And we had a crappy little old shed as a yoga hall, and we had rooms that had barely been renovated. We were barely charging anything, really cheap, but we were starting to behave as the leaders of a yoga retreat center, with having systems, making really proper kind, like writing good emails, having really good phone etiquette, briefing the volunteers who were working in the gardens on how to interact and behave with guests that were coming. So we were basically being a retreat center before we had guests. But then by the time they showed up, we were ready. And then there were lots of downfalls and lots of stuff going wrong, and all the funny, weird stories that were in hindsight, you just go like, oh my God, I can't believe we did this. But it was first, what do we want? Who do we need to be to have that? And everything else flowing from there.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much, Esther, for being here for this conversation. I've really thoroughly enjoyed spending time, and I trust we'll see each other again, and we'll bring you back to those heart and soul conversations here for more.
Such a pleasure.
Guys, if you have enjoyed this and you want to hear more from Esther, especially around her leadership experience, if this is something that you're looking, leadership, assertiveness, etc., her contact details will be underneath this video, along with a little bit more information about her and her social media presence, etc. If you have questions, feel free as always to pop them in the comment sections, or if you have suggestions, or if you want to share your own experience. And then, of course, if you are liking our content, please follow our channel and hit the bell button if you want notifications about upcoming content. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Esther, for being here.
Thank you. Such a pleasure.
Again
See
soon.
you soon.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.